All right, welcome everyone to episode 9 of the We Can't Believe They Gave Us a Show with Nick and Jim. I'm Jim Burneka,
Nick Magoteaux.
and today we're joined by David Dachinger. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick and Jim. It's great to be with you guys again. We had a great conversation, I thought, in the Fishbowl in Indianapolis back in FDIC. And yeah, I was looking forward to continuing that conversation.
Absolutely. Firefighter Nation kind of played matchmaker with us. And I thought it worked out well enough to where we were like, let's do this again.
Yeah.
So here we are. So we're gonna some of the stuff we may have talked about, some of the stuff I know we haven't talked about, but if you don't mind, let's go right into kind of retirement. So it wasn't too long ago you left the job.
Yeah.
How did that whole thing work out for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've gone into a deep exploration of it a couple of different ways because I think it's so impactful for anybody who's a first responder, specifically a firefighter, to leave that job. It's an epic kind of life event that it's hard to prepare for. And so part of my process and kind of coming to terms with it is actually doing a couple of what I call mini documentaries about it on the Responder Resilience podcast. Also, I've written about it. I've written a couple of articles for Firefighter Nation about retirement. And so that kind of helps me to process it because to me, it was like I got to this point where I thought I might be ready to retire. And I had a plan A, which was to work on producing videos for like a prisoner population in LA. They were like stress reduction videos. I'm like, okay, that's a purpose I can kind of embrace in my next chapter. So I decided to pull the plug on June of 2021 and get to the finish line, and that plan A kind of dissolved. It didn't work, and now I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, I need to have something that's going to give me a mission and a purpose. So I had to find a plan B, which turned out to be starting a podcast, and that led to a lot of really positive relationships and learning about first responder stuff I never had a clue about in the past, right? Stuff that, we have a kind of a limited view when we're doing the job, and there's other people out there, other parts of the country doing other aspects of it, whether it's, say, wildland firefighting or, undercover law enforcement. I never knew that much about animal control. So it's been a learning process, and in retirement started to give me that sense back of, okay, I have a mission and a purpose. I'm connecting with people from the professions and still part of some kind of, tribe, if you will.
Absolutely.
And we were kind of talking off air a little bit before we started, just about this and how it's kind of it's an emerging topic, even though it's, obviously been around forever. But it seems like, a lot of guys, they go forever. They go they're on the job until they can't, or they decide to retire and they don't have a plan. And now, you obviously had a plan, like you said, but when that plan kind of fell apart, did you feel like there was some sort of like mental health shift in that, or how did that affect you? Not being able to execute the plan that you thought that you had already set up.
Yeah, it's a rough one because you kind of, I think we're such action-driven creatures that we don't want to just stop. And I'm not the kind of person that's going to sit around and do nothing. So when that first opportunity dissolved, I was like really scrambling, and so yeah, it was a stressful time. It was you second guess, all right, did I leave too early, or should I have stayed on another year? Just kind of like keep letting it play out. And you miss the job so much leaving it immediately. It's so many aspects to it. There's the adrenaline rush. There's like hormonal aspects to it. You get adrenaline, cortisol, but also when we help people, we feel the happy hormones. Like it's the endorphins, and that disappears, right? Unless you can find another opportunity to help people or do some kind of extreme sport that gives you the rush. We have to look for, all right, is that replaceable? And if it is replaceable, how do I find something that's gonna give me that same sense of whatever it is, helping others? Like, what does helping look like when I'm not wearing the uniform anymore?
Yeah. I know I floundered with that as well. Um, retiring in June of 21, I was just curious, did COVID have anything to do with that?
Not at all. I worked through COVID, and I feel like I bookended my fire career with 9/11 in the beginning and COVID at the end. But no, it was really nothing to do with COVID. It was more like, judging, okay, how important is sleep to my overall health, long-term health? How important is, stress reduction to my overall health and long-term health? So I started kind of weighing those variables, and I started on the job later in life, so I felt like I really want to make sure my next chapter, have as much resilience as I can going forward.
Now, when you retired, did you stay put as far as your residence, or did you get out and move?
Yeah, I stayed put for a couple of years, and then we did move down to Florida a couple of years ago. So another aspect to retirement, right? I'm now removed from my firehouse, my union brothers. Um, I've missed some events like, funerals, parties. I started a retiree dinner group that someone else took the reins on that, but now I miss those dinners. So I kind of jumped into a new situation like, okay, this move is probably going to be good, but I'm going to have to kind of bite the bullet on some of the losses and kind of putting more losses on top of losses. So it took a couple of years, and now I'm finally, I'd say, getting to a place where I'm building community here with the fire people here and just in general. It's a process, it takes some time.
So one of the things that you've done is you're a peer coach with 22-0, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
So fill us in on how you got started with that, what exactly the organization is, just kind of run us down on what exactly entails being a peer coach for 22-0.
Sure. And you guys will appreciate this. Being podcasters, we meet a lot of really cool people, right? Doing cool stuff out there. And I was approached by someone who said, yeah, I created 22-0, and um, perhaps you'd like to speak about it on your podcast. So we brought on Nick Davis, who's one of the founders, and Dr. Pam Arnell, who's the director. And through that interview, I learned about 22-0, went through the process myself, and then became a coach. It ties into the retirement piece because it has given me a great sense of purpose and mission to help fellow first responders and veterans doing this work with 22-0. So what it is, essentially two processes that help the brain heal from trauma and distressing emotions. So all of us encounter trauma from childhood, perhaps through maybe military experience and then doing the job. Trauma could be calls out there in the field. It could be within the agency, moral injury, institutional abandonment, but we carry that trauma. In our culture, we're not really shown how to, just dump the bucket if our bucket is getting too full with all this sludge that we're carrying around. 22-0 is kind of like, think of it as a smoke alarm. We go for an activated smoke alarm because someone burned the toast. We clear the smoke and the alarm should reset and not activate. But if you think of our brain when we're experiencing a traumatic kind of recall, that's that smoke alarm that won't shut off. It's still activating even though we're not in that stressful moment anymore. So what 22-0 does is help kind of rewire the brain so that it puts the memory and the event in the right folder in the file drawer, but it's not in our face anymore. It's not showing up in dreams. It's not being triggered by situations we find ourselves in. It's more of a memory rather than a triggered, distressing recollection, if that makes sense.
It almost sounds like EMDR.
A lot of similarities, and some of it works very, it doesn't use eye movement per se, but it's a kind of more of a visual process. But what they both do is allow someone to, first of all, in 22-0, we don't really talk about the trauma in great detail. I think sometimes telling the story over and over again gets us deeper into it and perhaps triggers us. But it's a way of starting to pull back and have some perspective on that event in our lives. And when we can become more of the observer rather than the active participant on a daily basis, then it starts to shift things for us. So, I think both are very effective, and I know I've done EMDR and I found it to work as well.
Interesting. And I got to ask because I mean we just talked about retirement a second ago, but
Mhm.
circling back, did you notice when you retired that perhaps some of those early calls that you had really before you knew any better just stuffed it down and stuffed it down? Did you did any of those kind of reappear when you finally slowed down and stopped actually working?
Yeah, I've heard of that happening, not so much in my case, but I've heard of other first responders that we've interviewed speaking about that. Because now you got time, right? You're not busy all the time. You're not distracted all the time. And now the stuff bubbles up. And we get a lot of 22-0 clients who are experiencing that. I have worked with a couple of fire medics who did phenomenal work, like high level, tactical flight medic, urban, high call volume work. And if you look at their body of work, it's incredible. Just the guy you would want to be, taking you or grandma to the hospital. But then they carry around like the pain of the couple of calls that didn't go right, or there's moral injury because they had to treat someone, where in their mind it was, there was an injustice there. And they carry that and suffer with it for such a long time after they've done this amazing job and given to, society through their incredible work. So that's where EMDR and 22-0, I think, are incredibly effective. For me, I processed some stuff before I retired that were calls that I could not, they were just looping in my head and troubling. So I recognized that early, and I might have processed something after, a couple of things after the fact, but I did try to jump on as soon as I learned that there was an EMDR. I'm like, okay, let's see what it can do.
I love how you're trying to be proactive and retire in a good place
Mhm.
and kind of set yourself up in the future to excel.
Well, yeah, again, I think so many of us have given, a lot of our lives, right? We've given a lot of time, worked holidays, weekends, our families have also sacrificed. And I think when we get to that retirement piece, like, uh, we kind of deserve to enjoy that, right? And not carry this weight with us any further. But I think it's a kind of a characteristic that's common is that we carry this stuff. We kind of feel like we can help everybody else, but we don't really seek out to help ourselves so easily. So, um, some like to know that we can change that. We can offer tools where someone can get relief quickly. It doesn't take necessarily months and years. It can take a handful of sessions.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting is, well, and I think both Jim, and probably yourself, David, it's you when you retire and you may not be necessarily in a good place or even before retirement, you are doing things to help others in a disguise to help yourself, right? Like, like we have our conference together, and Jim and I were talking at one point, and it was like, well, the reasons why I wanted to cover these topics is because this is what I was,
Yeah.
having issues with. And so it's kind of interesting, that that we have these, that we're still trying to help each other, help others, even though that we're having so many issues ourselves.
Yeah, it's so common, and and I think we're also just we have that high tolerance for pain, right? And so we're like going into this mode of like, all right, I've carried it for this long, I can keep carrying it, but it always manifests in a way that's not going to look good, right? We're either gonna it's going to affect our loved ones, it's going to affect our health, it's going to affect something that's quality of life, and again, I think. You've already contributed so much, sacrificed a lot. Like now it's your time. Do whatever you can to just make it as healthy and enjoyable as possible.
Well, and it's every once in a while, it's okay to be selfish, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's we can't, we really can't help someone else unless our cup is full, right? We have to kind of fill that cup first, get rid of the sludge, but fill our cup at the same time, and then we're able to give to others. So it's a balance, but I think we also have to learn that skill once, especially in retirement, but probably anytime. It should be something that they're teaching us way earlier on in our careers to make that balance.
I kind of think you and I are similar as far as, first of all, we're both really good looking. For all those that are listening out there that can't see us, just take my word for it.
100%.
And and secondly, like we're not doing things the same way that we were, but we're still contributing at high levels. Like I basically realized I have been repurposed, and I feel like same thing with you. It's different, but it's still good.
Exactly. And some of that's, look, it's a process of discovery. Sometimes plan A, plan B, plan C may not work out. But I'm sure, Jim, you were open to possibilities, right? Some things might looked like they were something that could serve others and be something you'd be interested in doing. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we kind of find that right out of the gate. And sometimes it can take some time, but I think we just have that servant's heart where, if we're a little bit curious and a little bit willing to try things, even if they may be out of our comfort zone, we can, sometimes those are the greatest opportunities of all, like something that seems like, I'm like moving down here. It was like, if I really want to leave all that stuff that's, familiar and I can count on, and in the long run, it's worth it. But sometimes in the short term, you just have to experience that discomfort and just, and power through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Speaking of tough times and things that you power through, I want to go back and touch on your cancer.
Mhm.
We talked about it briefly in the fishbowl in Indianapolis, but um, if you don't mind, could you kind of touch on that again, your diagnosis, your treatments, and then I'll follow up. I'll ask you about your books.
Yeah, it's something I think it's important to talk about it. And I was literally walking around with stage 4 cancer and had no clue. So this speaks to, getting checked regularly. It could be as simple as like your dentist doing an oral exam. They weren't doing them so much back before I had cancer, but afterwards it seemed like it became more of a normal thing. But that's, they're checking your, not only inside your mouth, but, your lymph glands on the sides of your neck and that sort of thing. So I was walking around with stage 4 cancer, and I didn't know until I went to get my hair cut. And I was sitting in the chair with Fast Freddy cutting my hair, and he's like, "Dave, what's that on your neck?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Look in the mirror, and there was a walnut-sized lump on the left side of my neck. So that started the whole journey into multiple doctors, all kinds of diagnostic procedures, and hearing the words, "You have stage 4 cancer." And we talked about this in Indianapolis, but I was so kind of blown away that I didn't hear stage 4. I just heard cancer, and that was enough, right? And we were talking about the impact of the word cancer and how, how it just floors us when we hear it. So, long story short, fast tracked into chemo and radiation for about 7, 8 weeks. Brutal treatment, especially oral cancer. Radiation really wreaks havoc on your mouth and your gums and your saliva glands. And so it's difficult to eat, lost a lot of weight, really had to be creative in terms of finding foods I couldn't actually get down, and wound up needing surgery to remove the lymph glands, which were not responding to the radiation. But the piece that I think really made a difference was not only my wife, who was an amazing person to begin with, but just became a caregiver extraordinaire and was there every step of the way. But also the brothers from the union who came to hang out, who, checked in. Sometimes, just having someone sit there with you, not even talking, but just sit there with you, just holding space is a gift in itself. So, so that and, faith and just, wanting to live, you got to have that desire to get busy living, because the choice is get busy living or get busy dying. And you hear that cancer word, which choice are you going to make? So for me, it was obvious. It was clear. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get busy living.
it's
Yeah.
it's so crazy to think, because it's so I've been fairly fortunate that I have not been diagnosed with cancer, but I did have a misdiagnosis of cancer at one point in time. And when you were talking about your story, it really struck me as like, I guess this is everybody's kind of reaction when it happens. Is like, I specifically remember it. I was in the hospital, and you know, I was fortunate, unfortunate, however you want to look at it, but I had a what we consider a baby doctor, one of the interns, comes in, she's doing the best, everything by the book, right? She sits down on the bed with you. She's, trying to come at you at your level and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, well, we think you have cancer. And at that point, like everything past that was just white noise to me. Like I couldn't focus, I couldn't pay attention. And then the unfortunate part for me was as soon as she left, the clergy comes in and is like, oh, I don't think he knew exactly what was going on, but he just comes in and is like, hey, making my rounds, just wanted to see if you wanted to pray. And at that point I was just like, you know what? Like, yeah, let's do it. Like anything's
It
gonna help.
worked, didn't
Yeah,
it?
but I mean, it's such a crazy thing that just a simple word like that can just devastate you and just kind of completely blow you off your game and just take you off course. So I know, like I remember when Jim was diagnosed, he sent me a photo of what the doctor wrote down for him, and I was like, "What the hell is this? Does this mean you have cancer?" Like, and I'm sure that was probably the most he had
Oh,
to kind of put out at the moment, like trying to gather himself.
Sarah Janke still wants to kill me today because I told her through a text message.
Yeah.
And the truth is, and I don't know, David, if you were the same way, but like to me that word is it's like more venomous. It's like the worst cuss word there is. Because when you say that, it doesn't matter. There's no happiness, there's no joy when you tell somebody you have cancer, even whatever cancer may be. It's always like, oh shit, like this is serious and not in a good thing. So yeah, I had difficulty even saying the word. Like I had to have my wife tell some people because I couldn't get it even out of my mouth. And I've got a big mouth and I talk a lot, but there was so much pain that I passed on when I just by telling people.
Yeah, you're totally right. The word has this incredible heaviness and weight and dark kind of energy to it that and I think some of it is obviously it depends on the diagnosis. Depends on a lot of things, but we just culturally have taken cancer to be this, almost like equaling death. And in some cases, it may, but part of what I wanted to do with this is like, I don't want to be a victim. It sucks. The treatment was brutal. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But what's the gift in this? Like, where can I find some positivity in all this? Like, why, it's almost like Saving Private Ryan, like, earn this, right? Like, what are you going to pull out of this that's going to be able to pay forward in some way? And that led me on a journey of somewhat of self-discovery, somewhat of like just appreciating the most simple things in life, whether it was, friends, family, being alive. And of course, I wanted to get back to my job at the fire department. And when I did, I appreciated it that much more. Every shift had much more meaning than it had before cancer. And so that led us on a journey of how can we pay it forward? We created some stress reduction programs for cancer patients and caregivers, and my wife and I wrote a book. Her perspective of the caregiver, my perspective of the cancer patient, and so that was our way of, kind of taking a really crappy experience and finding some positivity in it.
I love that. And it's interesting. I didn't sit down and write a book about it. But what I did do is I sat in this room and recorded myself. Just me, just my show, but me. I was the only guest. And I remember it's I know I can go back and listen to them, and I know it's funny because it's going to be it's different it's different viewpoints on how I was feeling whenever I was going on. So like the first one, I'm very like, I've got this, I'm going to kick its butt, blah blah blah. And then the next one, I'm depressed. And then the next one, I'm pissed because I know the city is going to fight me, and it's going to be a big, long, drawn out fight, which it was for a year and a half. And then just like, getting your wife involved, I had her do a show where she just sat down and just talked through everything. So that was my way of trying to make something positive out of a crappy situation. Um, yeah, so it's in a lot of ways, I think it's kind of similar.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a journey, right? You kind of go within to a certain extent and, put in some crazy situations like going from being the caregiver. We're really good at being the caregiver and starting IVs on people and doing what we do out there in the EMS world. Now all of a sudden you're a patient, right? It's like, how is it to be receiving the care, to be let someone else start a IV on you, a couple of times a week, and um, you know, just have to sit there and get medical advice and get medical support when we're the ones that typically do it. So now it's almost like humbling, right? It takes you to a place where like, we probably never would have chosen to go, but maybe there's a gift in that as well.
Yes, and in a weird way, I've even had the attitude since then. Between that and all my mental health struggles, I'm still here, and I feel like there's a reason for that.
Mhm.
And I mean, that doesn't get lost on me. And in fact, I think it drives me now even more knowing that all this crap that I went through, like, yeah, it sucked, but I can turn it around and make it a positive, and hopefully affect other people to where they don't have to go through any of the stuff that I went through.
Right.
And I imagine you feel the same exact way.
Yeah, I think that's, we get to do that. Having a podcast is one great thing where we try to bring that information to the audience. Respond to Resilience, we've interviewed numerous people about toxic fires, about FDNY's safe skin cancer screening programs, different technologies that are out there. So that's another way of kind of turning it into a positive. Yeah, we can now, help other people learn, maybe through our adverse experiences, like maybe they can avoid it by more awareness.
Speaking of which, so correct me if I'm wrong, you wrote two books on the subject, right?
Yeah, I contributed to one, and my wife and I wrote an entire book.
Okay. Are those books still available for if somebody in the audience was looking to purchase those?
Yeah, so the book that we wrote together is Live Calm with Cancer and Beyond, and that's available on Amazon. And the other one, I think it's called Cancer from Tears to Something. I believe that's still available. I haven't checked it out. And there's another book in the works though, which I'm excited about, and not about cancer, but it's about first responder mental health. And so I know you guys do an amazing program. You have one coming up, a summit, and this book is a companion to our podcast where we focused on mental health with clinicians. And so we're writing a book about, it's called Clinician's Guide to First Responder Mental Wellness. And it's anybody can read it because it's really digestible. It's kind of like if you took the podcast and kind of transformed it into a book. We're telling stories from our guest's perspective, talking about the subspecialties within first responder world. What are their challenges? What are they dealing with? And what would a clinician need to know in order to help that our population?
Oh, that seems like that's such a, I think, an important subject because I mean, we've talked about it in the past. I know we've talked about it at our conference and things like that about just having that cultural competency as a clinician. Because unfortunately, us first responder types, don't give many chances, especially when it comes to mental health. And sometimes that first opportunity or that first time that they're asking for help might be the only time. And so it's good to see that you guys are working on something that could help educate other clinicians to understand exactly the mindset of a first responder, and hopefully, get more people understanding of our situation, so that even if the person has to use an EAP, or not familiar with a culturally compliant clinician,
Hmm.
there's others out there that still have some information that they're able to refer upon that can help others.
Yeah, this would apply to chaplains, peer supporters, people that may work with first responders in different roles. And yeah, I think, part of what, like what you said, Nick, is that sometimes you only have one chance, one shot. If you blow that opportunity, you lose them. And when a first responder reaches out for help, it's like our 911 call. And you gotta be able to help them quickly. It's jumping back to 22-0. That's one of the things I love about it, is that we typically get people into the process really quickly. There's no insurance. It's absolutely free to them. And, the agency would never know. There's no, reporting to agencies. It's a very a fast, effective way to get help. And again, because you got one shot, you got to get it right.
Absolutely. And I also think that so often, and this isn't every case, but so often it seems that we wait until we're really dug ourselves a deep hole before we finally ask for help.
Mm.
Um, I mean, we're just late to the game when it comes to finally raising our hands and saying, "Okay, I guess I can use some help." And so that makes it that much even more important to get it right the first time, sending somebody. But also at the same time, and I think we can do this by just saying, hey, if you don't click with this person, that's okay. I've got another person we could try if this doesn't work.
Right.
And just sometimes it takes two or three, to find the right person that you can actually connect with and move forward with. And you just can't give up. You got to keep trying until you find that match.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that does happen for probably more often than we realize. And I think in terms of clinicians, we also, with the book, we want to make sure they're getting into it for the right reasons. There's a lot of things about first responder world that I think is kind of say sexy to the outside world to get involved with in some way. And so, we don't want people getting into this mental health arena for first responders, because it's, seems cool, or, want to hang out with those kind of people. We truly kind of want to make sure everybody goes through a sort of a checklist of, all right, you really doing this for the right reasons? You understand what this is entailing, the responsibility of it, and what you're going to be hearing and talking about. Because the first responders open up and start sharing some of the things that we experience out there. It's not for everybody, right? Not everybody can hold space for that. And it's really a gift when someone is able to kind of hear that stuff and not take it on as their own trauma.
Absolutely. So I know you're working on this book. Is there anything else that you're up to in this retirement?
Just like you guys, I'm coming up on episode number 9 on Firefighter Nation with that podcast called "Igniting the Shift Within," and that's been a great project. Been focusing more on the fire side, and particularly about some of the topics and issues that are emerging. Like how do we treat each other, like on the job? Women and women, men and men. Like how are we? Do we eat our own? Are we our own worst enemies? So topics like that. Really enjoying doing that in the Firefighter Nation, and seeing you guys out there doing good work as well. It's kind of fun to be leading those parallel podcasts.
Absolutely. And are you doing any music at all?
I'm doing mostly video. really discovered video editing and production. And so I do it for the podcast. We have sponsors that I'll now create their ads. And so I feel like with music, I kind of had an amazing career in that, and I've kind of moved on to something else. But you know, music is a part of all these videos. So even though I may use existing music, sometimes I'll also write my own for for various spots.
I didn't know if you use that as kind of like music is almost like a coping mechanism, or your place to kind of just, all right, I need to decompress and escape for a while and kind of get lost in that.
It was it back in the day. These days, it's more like growing tomatoes and hot peppers. I really just like going out there and puttering around like with plants and stuff, flowers and fruit trees and vegetable plants, and that's kind of like my Zen place now.
Nice. Good deal. I just finished Mike Campbell's autobiography earlier today, and it was such behind the scenes look at Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Mhm.
And I just, going like seeing that side of things is pretty cool just reading about it. And you lived as part of that for a while. So I not necessarily with the Heartbreakers, but being in the studio and everything else, it was a cool behind the scenes look. And you were doing that too with all your projects.
It was definitely a fun time, and at that point in my life, most of that I was living in New York City, and New York City had an incredibly vibrant recording studio scene and music scene, live music. I literally I played at a place called the China Club, and Donald Trump would come in and bring his entourage, and so that was like back then he was just a real estate magnate, but New York City was such a cool place to be in the '90s, and you could just run into like not only just music artists but sports figures. It's kind of like a melting pot for all that stuff. So I really enjoyed it a lot, but also things change over time. Rap and hip hop became more of a thing, and that was not so much my speed. So I started shifting into other parts of music that took me out of the studio somewhat.
Of course, when you said the China Club, everybody my age just instantly went to think of the Dave Chappelle skits with Rick James. Like I
Yep.
didn't see Nick was going there too. As soon as you
Yep.
said China Club.
Yeah, different China Club.
Oh, okay. All
Okay,
right.
I was gonna say like,
No, it was a nightclub in on the Upper West Side of New York, in the basement, and they were famous for having a Tuesday night jam. So you could see people from Hall and Oates band. Bruce Willis would get up there with his harmonica. Incredible musicians. Always be somebody heavy in the audience. So I would either go there for a jam or our band would play there from time to time. But that's just one of many clubs that were really kicking in the '90s in New York City. It was just such a fun scene, and I'm just happy that I had an opportunity to be part of it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Nick, you got anything else to bug Dave? I know he's got to get out of here soon.
no, well, I mean, just obviously, where can we find? Obviously, you have a podcast on Firefighter Nation. You have your own independent podcast, Responder Resilience. So, just where can people find more information about you, find your podcasts, things like that?
Yeah, our website is respondertv.com, and you can find out more about Responder Resilience there. Obviously, Firefighter Nation for Igniting the Shift Within podcast. And I'm out there on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and
OnlyFans.
haven't gone there yet.
times times haven't got that tough for David.
That's a different audience, yeah.
Well,
And
on that note,
your
oh, go
MySpace for
ahead.
your band is
How about you guys? What's going on? I know you got your summit coming up, so love to hear more about that. I looked at the list of speakers you have. It is absolutely stellar. So yeah,
Yeah, I can't believe we tricked him into coming to Ohio of all places. No, we're everything is going along really smooth. We've we just ended our early bird special on ticket prices, and You got nearly 100 people already signed up, 13 states,
Well,
plus Canada. Like, so I love it. Like, people are just like you, they realize this is a great lineup. This is a great value. Um, and they're coming all the way to Beaver Creek, Ohio.
Well, it's such a funny thing with the conference, because like when Jim and I started this conference in 2018, the hot topic was cancer, and so we were like, okay, let's bring them in with the cancer, and then I'm going to shove mental health down their throat. And so we worked purposely to kind of like alternate subjects so that you came to get something that you wanted to hear and got something that you probably needed to hear. And it's so crazy to see how we've kind of almost completely 360 to that, where it's everybody wants to talk about mental health, and not a lot of people want to talk about cancer and things like that. So we always strive pretty hard to try to come up with a lineup that encompasses all sorts of different types of health and wellness topics, not just cancer, not just mental health, but nutrition, sleep, fitness. I mean, just there's such a litany of things that go into um, our health and wellness as first responders, and really even just as people, that there's a lot of different things that we could talk about that not necessarily a lot of people pick up on. Like last year was really cool. We did like an introduction to equine therapy, which is was kind of neat for us, because we ended up moving venues, and we could have done it once at our old previous venue. That would probably be the last time we were welcome back there.
I mean, bringing the
But
horses into the conference.
Yes.
right, but having it, being able to do it, because we're at a fairgrounds that now, um like it was crazy when when we saw you down in Nashville. Another person came up to talk to us, and really told us how wonderful the horse experience was, because they're like, I hate horses, but there was something about it that really just kind of changed me and changed how I felt about horses. And so we're even bringing that back again this year. Our friend Tim Spradlin, fortunately lives right down the road and is willing to travel. Not too far, but he's willing to travel to help us out, and really try to help as many people as possible. So it's we're always trying to do something different and cutting edge, and stuff that not that you might not hear or talk about in maybe some of the larger speaker circuits. So
Like,
um,
we've just embraced the ridiculousness.
yeah,
Truly, like, and we've definitely evolved, because there was a one point in time, and Nick will tell you, like, I was adamant, like, we need to be professional, we need to wear suits, we need to, and I was throwing a conference like it was a mini FDIC, and it really did that one year, and was like, all right, let's never do that again, because that's just not, it's not us, it's not our style. And you get to this year, like, we're probably gonna be wearing robes. Like, I mean, the theme is Big Lebowski, and so we'll probably wear robes and jellies and be silly, and that'll be embraced. So it's different, but it's different in a good way. And
Yeah.
I think other people that have been there to see it, they're like, this is weird, but yet cool. And they definitely get their money's worth, and they feel like it's worth their time, and it's been great. I don't know what or how we've created it, but it's been amazing.
Can't imagine all the moving pieces that go into putting one of these things on, but I love the fact that you're not taking it totally seriously. I mean, there are, maybe you've tried this, but I've heard of conferences that are being run using incident command system, right? To, make sure all the, you know, chain of command is all in place, and that it, you kind of
oh,
organize and manage it like that. But, we can take these
See,
things too seriously, right?
that is totally not us. Like
we're like yellow card or something. Like
Yeah,
I
we're
don't know.
we're we make this shit up as we go along. I'm fairly certain. So
And
I
it
mean,
and the thing is, it's I mean, we have help, our family helps. We've got some great friends that help us the week of and everything. But like really it's him and I. And the thing is both of us have a wild imagination. And neither one of us tend to tell each other no. So like if you can dream it, which we do, we make it happen. So it's just it's cool. It's fun. It's um I don't know. I don't want to speak for Nick, but I love the freedom
yeah.
that we have and that we and just the ability to create each year. And I mean, we look forward to it, and I know our attendees look forward to it too, because they're just like, what kind of ridiculousness are Nick and Jim going to do this year?
Well, and it's so funny because it's like we have, as we've done it year after year, we gain a following. We have people that come every year. We have people, like, for example, a little bit of a, I guess, a sneak behind the curtain for this year is, we have a friend of ours. He's a, firefighter local to our area. So last year,
Don't give away stuff.
I'm not, hold on,
Okay.
geez Louise.
They
So
gotta pay for it.
last year, we had pro wrestling as the theme. As you can see, the belt in Jim's background there. That was, we commissioned those. I have one. He has one. But a friend of ours, he's very passionate about the cause itself, and so like last year, we asked him, was like, hey, do you think you could turn the stage into a wrestling ring? And he's like, oh yeah, I could do that. And here he goes. He full on turned it into, had ropes and everything, and it looked exactly like a wrestling ring. But the crazy part is, we go like, okay, how much, we need to pay you for your time. We need to pay you for your materials. Like, we always try to do the right thing when it comes to this stuff, because it's not, you know, we don't expect anybody to do things for free.
Mhm.
Um, and he's like, no, don't you can't pay me. Your money's no good here. So we've gained a lot of, good friends and really resourceful people. I mean, he's doing a project, which I'm not going to tell you what it is. You have to come to the show to see it. It's going to be spectacular. We've given him plenty of runway to go with it, but he's got this. We've given him an idea for this year's conference based on the Big Lebowski, and um, again, we're like forcing him to take money at this point, but
I about got into a fight with him last Tuesday, just at lunch with the for the check, trying to paying for it. Like, yeah, he's that kind of guy. Like
Yeah,
he just
wow.
wants
I
to
love
help
the fact
out.
that you guys are, you're not taking it super seriously because we can tend to do that, when we're getting into these things. And I see you have a beaver on your wrestling belt there, so that's clearly an amazing accomplishment to just be able to have that as a feature in your conference. My hat is off to you.
If and you've been to enough shows to where sometimes when you're talking mental health, and people are telling their stories, it's heavy, and it could really just suck out all the oxygen from the room.
Hmm.
And if you have too many of that, stacked on each other, like your attendees will leave that day and they will be wiped out just emotionally for the
Yeah.
ride that they took. And so we've realized that we have to have balance. We have to break up the monotony. We need to be silly. We need to have a little bit of fun. Yeah, we're going to cover this stuff. It's going to be heavy. It's going to suck. But then the next one is going to be more uplifting, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to. It's just kind of a balance, and it's one of the things we had to learn kind of the hard way. But I think we've taken it since then and have excelled at and really thrived at just balance in our lineup and our speakers and what we talk about and how the schedule is put. Like there is there's a lot of thought that goes behind that, and a lot of experience as well. Like that like usually when you look at the list, like you're not thinking about that kind of stuff. It's probably no different than you creating a set list back in the day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I found the same exact thing in terms of bringing humor into, a somewhat heavy topic. Talking about retirement, I've done a presentation a few times recently, and I looked at, kind of went through my final run through them, like something's missing, and there was no humor in it, right? I had to look for a humorous aspect, and I found a great clip from Police Squad, where Frank is retired. And I put that into my presentation. You just feel like the room just lightens up at that moment. That going forward, you can get a little bit more into some heavy topics, but so important to have that balance. I really think you guys are onto something special there.
Well, I'll tell you that the most powerful speakers I think we've ever had always have a tinge of humor in their presentation. Like the one I can think of right off the top of my head was we had Ben Vernon. And I don't know if you've ever met
Yeah.
Ben or been part of it, seen his presentation, but Ben was stabbed on duty by a patient that he was trying to help. And he goes on, I mean, he calls him Mr. McStabby. Like, I mean, he approaches the subject with such a humor in such a humorous way that while it's a very troubling and traumatic thing that had happened to him, he could see the silver lining, like you did with with the books and everything too. You know, it's like he took kind of the trauma and turned it into triumph, and it's really funny. Like all our great speakers have really had that kind of mentality, and I'll leave you with this. Last year was the funniest one. So we had pro wrestling as the theme last year,
I know where you're going. All right.
and we had Jimmy Hart, the Mouth of the South, as our guest MC. Um, which the dude is phenomenal. Like he is 80. I think he was 81 when he came. It was
He was 80. He's 81
80.
now.
He's 81 now. He was 80 when he was there. I mean, the dude is just. I mean, he has so much energy and just he was down for anything. But
Yeah, baby, I'm down for everything.
we had Michael Segru talking, and a lot of times when these speakers they leave a part of themselves out
Mhm.
on the on the floor, right, when they speak. And Michael was getting kind of teared up and having some emotions about the ride he just took everybody else on. And he finished his presentation. Jim goes up there and goes, "You did great, baby." And it just instantly turned, he just started to chuckle. It's and I think that
I
just
snapped him out of his moment of
that
misery and made him laugh and kind of
but I
it
think
was
that
good.
completely encapsulates what we do at the conference.
Yeah, well, that's great. It's beautiful, and it taps into first responders. How we cope anyway, right? We turn to humor, dark humor. That's how we kind of decompress a lot of times, and so it's kind of it's just it's a very common part of our coping mechanism. So it's amazing that you guys have incorporated it into your conference, and I wish you all the best. Really excited for you guys. You have, like I said, an amazing lineup. I know some of those people very well, and I know you're going to knock it out of the park.
Absolutely. Well,
Thank
I
you.
know you got to get out of here. So again, thank you for hanging out with us. Um, you had a choice this time. Firefighter Nation. You're like, oh, I guess I'll talk to these guys, but you willingly accepted to come on, and we appreciate that. Check out David's show on Firefighter Nation, also his other one, Igniting the Shift Within. He's got books, he's got everything that the 22-0. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. But I guess it's time to go, Nick.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's Nick. He's
He's
David,
Jim.
and I am Jim, and we will see you all next month.
All right.